Welcome to how much should we address the fact that last week's episode was messed up, or should we just...
I mean, sure, why not?
I'm never sure how much, because, I don't know how much listeners want to listen to us talk about the inner workings of the podcast.
Well, I mean, there will always be listeners who don't care, and there will be ones that do, I guess. I don't know.
That's true.
So, I guess I feel like we should bring it up at least a bit.
You know what I should do?
What's that?
I should just leave this part in.
Just because it might someone might find it interesting.
There you go. Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
And I am Jeff.
And we're going to answer your questions today. But first, I have a question for you, Jeff.
What's that?
How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. Been busy remodeling my bathroom. Mm-hmm. I've never done anything like that before. And last night, I literally had to hack apart our bathroom vanity with an old rusty hatchet.
Oh, geez. Oh, because I did see your post about finding a use for a hatchet.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I started taking the thing apart, and I got down. I basically took apart all the sides, and then there was the bottom part that's stuck to the floor. I couldn't figure out how it was stuck to the floor, and I didn't know what to do. So I would pry at one thing with a screwdriver, hit another thing with a hammer, nothing would happen. Eventually, I started hitting it with the pointy part of the hammer. And then I was like, man, if only I had an axe or something. Then I realized I have a hatchet that I bought at a garage sale. It's like a little tomahawk looking thing.
Sure.
I bought it at a garage sale 6 years ago. So when I got that and I hacked it apart, it was pretty handy.
What was your post? It was finally finding a use for a rusty hatchet. # things a serial killer would say.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it was. So... yeah, I found a use for it.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't killing cereal boxes.
Oh, I did that too.
Isn't that what?
Yeah,
that was cereal killer.
Have you ever read Sandman, the Neil Gaiman graphic novel series?
No. Skylar's read it a few times.
It's really, really good. But one of the earlier stories involves some of the characters. They stay at this hotel, and there's a sign outside saying that there's a cereal convention. Spelled Cereal.
Sure.
And one of the characters remarks oh, I wonder why there's, what is there, a bunch of farmers here or something? And then the comic shows the inside of that convention, and it is a bunch of serial killers. They're all oh my goodness, you're the one they call dog food? Yup, that's me. Oh man, I wonder if the Corinthian is going to be here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we can go ahead and get into the episode.
Sure.
So Jeff, there's an assortment of D20s in front of you.
Hey, there is.
I would like you to roll one of them.
I think this one's the good one.
I'll even tell you right now. I'm gonna have you roll a perform check.
Oh.
Should I tell you what the context is before you roll?
What am I performing?
Okay. You are the famed halfling bard Olive Rustkettle. You've been kidnapped by the red dragon Mistanar Paradnicles.
Uh-oh.
Your caravan was attacked. You're on your way to sing at some noble's wedding. The caravan was attacked. You managed to convince the dragon that you were a great singer, so the dragon didn't kill you. However, the dragon has brought you back to her lair, and now you have to perform for the dragon. If you don't perform well enough, she's going to kill and eat you.
Uh-oh. All right.
So go on.
So I'm just going to roll a little sing check. What does the dice say, Gabe?
Is that a natural one?
Yeah.
Okay, well. Let me roll a fate. Oh, wow. Jeez. Okay. Well, the good news is that the sellsword Elias, or Alias, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, is coming to save you. She's been hired by the local, the guy who was doing the wedding. He hired the sellsword to come and save you.
Oh, thank goodness.
However, by the time that the sellsword arrives, the dragon unfortunately has already killed and eaten you because you rolled a natural 1 on your perform check. So unfortunately, you will not be able to take part from the dragon's horde. All right. The item that we have today was submitted by Chris via Facebook, and it is The Practical Book. This largish book with a burnished metal cover has no outer markings except a single cut quartz set into its center. The book, upon being opened, has but one sentence written in it. Pay the price in blood and knowledge. If a mortal creature sheds a drop of its blood upon the crystal and passes a DC 12 intelligence check, the book can then be used. It should be noted that before this time, the pages are impervious to ink. So if you tried to write in it, you couldn't. Now, once you do this, the book can be used as a spell book. And in fact, it's even a better spell book than a normal spell book, because I think normally spell books take up multiple pages per spell. I think
like
a 5th level spell takes up like 5 pages or something.
I think that's right. Yeah.
This one, no spell takes up more than 1 page.
Cool.
But in addition to that, there are 2 things that the book does. The first one is kind of like a cost. Whenever you attune yourself to the book in this way, the book consumes 1 memory from you. It is never a memory that is immediately detrimental to you. So like if you're trying to get into your house and you're trying to punch in the code to turn off the alarm so it doesn't call the police, it won't take that from you. It won't take that code from you.
Right.
However, it might take where you put your keys. So then the next morning, oh crap, where are my keys? It's all because of that stupid book. Well, anyway, so it takes a memory from you. Once it takes a memory from you, though, the book, again, in addition to being able to be used as a normal spell book, the book can create objects out of magical paper. So there's a little list of items it can create here. I'm not entirely sure whether these are at will or once per day. The first few, I think, could easily be at will. The latter ones, maybe less often. The first one, it can create a ladder up to 50 feet in length. Now, first off, that's a really long ladder.
Yeah. That's a big ladder.
Yeah. So you can create a ladder out of paper that I imagine is magically strong enough to support you. Be careful not to get a paper cut, though, as you're climbing up and down this ladder.
To wear like protective gloves or something.
Right. The next item is a length of rope up to 100 feet long. So once again, when you're sliding down that rope, you better be wearing gloves. And next, it can create a 5x5 platform that can be anywhere between 1 to 20 feet tall. So I guess kind of more like a pillar than a platform.
Right. I think I was picturing like something like a scaffolding or something like that.
Oh yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So you can create a ladder, a rope, and a platform. It can also create wings that appear on the owner's back that can be summoned for 1 round per level of the user. So I'm guessing it would probably be you can only use that a certain number of times per day. And then when you have these wings, so I'm picturing like big paper wings. I think that's pretty cool. The wings have a fly speed equal to the unaugmented land speed of the owner. And if you already have wings, that doesn't do anything. So you can't give yourself double wings from this. And then here's the last thing I think is really cool. Once per day, it can create an origami creation that is essentially a summon monster spell of a level that a wizard of your level could use.
Cool.
So you cast summon monster, you summon a dragon or like a pseudo dragon or something, and it is an origami pseudo dragon.
That's pretty cool.
I think that's really cool. This is probably going to make me possibly sound even more nerdy than I already do on this podcast about Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
But I used to be really big into origami. I was into origami long before I was into D&D.
Oh.
When I was in 5th grade, I think, my teacher brought in an origami book for some reason. And I thought, like, oh my goodness, this is the coolest thing ever. So I learned how to make some stuff. I really liked it. I still own a few origami books. I don't really make anything anymore. But I don't know how big of an impact this was in swaying her. But one of the first times that my current wife and I hung out, I made her an origami peacock out of a $1 bill.
Oh.
That's one thing I can do just off the top of my head. It's really cool. She thinks it's a turkey. She will say over and over for years and years that it is a turkey and not a peacock. But it is a peacock, I assure you. And if you were to summon a peacock using this book,
that's exactly what it would look like.
That's exactly what it looked like. It would look like a paper currency from a world that does not exist in the D&D universe.
It's George Washington on it.
Yes. Now, one more thing I should mention about the practical book. This book, in addition to the cost when you attune to it, has a drawback. If you ever are dead if the owner of the book is ever dead for more than one full day. So if you die and your party doesn't resurrect you fast enough, the book erases all spells that are transcribed in it. Ooh. So all the spells you put in it are gone.
Oh, dear.
And you are no longer attuned to it. And if you attune yourself to it again,
you have to
give up another memory.
Oh, dear.
Now, I think the idea of a book or just anything taking a memory, I think is really, really cool. I've talked about the Adventure Zone podcast on here before.
Sure.
There was one of the last arcs of that campaign was called The Suffering Game. And in that, the player characters had to go to essentially like this evil game show where like they go into a room and then there will be like a wheel they have to spin. And whatever it lands on, that character permanently loses something. Now, when they started out, the penalties were fairly small, and it would be like, oh, okay, your character's colorblind now.
Oh, dear.
And that didn't necessarily have a huge mechanical detriment.
Sure.
But then it started getting worse. At one point, one of the characters, he lost his proficiency in the axe that he used when the campaign started. So the way that this articulated within the universe was that his character lost the memories of learning how to use that.
Okay.
So it went back to when he was first learning how to use an axe, and then he could feel the memories being taken from him, and then he no longer had proficiency in an axe anymore.
Oh, man.
And I want to say there was even another part where another person had an even worse memory that was going to be taken from him. But the way that this worked was if you didn't want to give up whatever the wheel landed on, that's fine. You didn't have to, but in return, you had to spin the wheel twice.
Oh, dear.
I think at one point, one of the characters lost one of his fingers. One of the characters lost like an item that he had, like I don't know if it was a weapon. I think one of the characters gave up a weapon in exchange for one of the things that it landed on or something. So it's a really, really interesting arc, and it's like story-wise, that's a really big thing for a character to lose a memory.
Yeah.
It might not be something that is immediately detrimental to them, but just knowing that like you knew something and now it's permanently lost to you.
Right.
And that's a big deal. There were some other memories lost in that I won't mention because they're really, really important to the characters.
Oh, sure.
I very much recommend everybody go and listen to the Adventure Zone.
Yeah, no
this
spoilers.
Particular arc was really, really cool. But yeah, so losing a memory, I think that's probably the coolest part of this book. The second coolest part is the origami summon monsters.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's really cool.
Doesn't he have something added about like retrieving memories
of
yes. past owners?
Sorry, I forgot. There's one extra little thing on here. If someone can convince a god of knowledge to read from the book, the god of knowledge can read any memory of a former owner that was given to the book. And I think that's really cool. That's a really cool plot hook right there.
Yeah,
maybe for cool. Like a high level group, they find this book. They find out that, oh my goodness, the evil wizard Asirarak, before he became a demi-lich and created the Tomb of Horrors, he owned this book. And then like maybe according to legend, his, I don't know, vital weakness or something was the memory that was taken.
Oh, geez.
Now the players have to find a proxy for the god of knowledge and then convince the proxy to convince the god to come down and read it from the book. And maybe they could do a quest in exchange for that or something. Sure. That's a really, really cool plot hook.
Yeah.
So double thumbs up to Chris for creating this.
Yeah, it's really cool.
All right. I think that will do it for the Dragon's Hoard. If anybody wanted to submit an item for the Dragon's Hoard or a question for us to discuss, Jeff, how would they do so?
They could do that by emailing us at InterPartyConflict@gmail.com.
Sounds good.
All right, let's start with the first question from Fingers Fate on Facebook, and they ask, would you ever switch editions during a campaign?
I would if everybody was okay with it. That's the first thing we should say.
Yeah.
You never would want to like spring this on somebody else on your group.
It's a lot of work. There's a lot of prep involved.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're basically going to be changing everybody's character.
Right. So this could probably happen when, let's say, when 5th edition came out. I'm sure a lot of people did this. When 6th edition eventually comes out in a couple of years or 3, I hope it's a long way off, but however far off it is tomorrow. whenever that happens, let's say you're in the middle of a campaign and, you want to try out the new edition, I think it would be totally cool for a group to switch editions.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like you said, it's a lot of work. You want to make sure everybody's on board. If anybody is not up for that, if anybody doesn't want to have to change around how they play their character, then, maybe you should just wait till the current campaign's over and then do the next campaign that way. That being said, I think, it could be really cool. It's really going to depend, though, on what edition you're coming from and what edition you're going to.
Sure.
If you had a 3rd edition game and you're switching to Pathfinder or switching to 5th edition, you're probably going to have a pretty easy time.
Yeah, it's nothing too crazy. I mean, 3.5 to Pathfinder is basically just adding a couple features.
Pretty much, yeah. And in a lot of the cases, like when 3rd edition upgraded to 3.5, when I was first playing as Ichi, when I first made Ichi, he was a 3rd edition barbarian. And then just a few weeks into the campaign, they released the 3.5 update. And it was like undoubtedly a plus for him. Right, yeah. Everything was better for him.
Yeah, it's just, you got an ability every level or something.
Yeah,
something every level.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing they wanted to change with 3.5 was get rid of dead levels.
Right.
That being said, if you were going from 3.5 to 4th edition,
it's a bit tougher.
It's going to be quite different because 4th edition was very, very different from any other edition.
Yeah. In most cases, at least when it comes to characters, you're pretty much going to be changing them. You have to change some stats in some places. But,
yeah.
But I mean, it could be as far as, if you like a particular play style, you might even have to pick a new class altogether.
You may have to, yeah. And that may sound weird, but so much of the game can be fixed or changed by just changing the flavor of a campaign, by changing the description of how, changing the way that you look at things.
Yeah.
Like you could easily make, an example. When 4th edition came out, I, of course, tried updating Ichi to 4th edition. I hadn't been playing Ichi for several years by that point, but I, of course, wanted to remake Ichi in 4th edition, and Ichi was a barbarian.
Right.
But the 4th edition barbarian, when it didn't come out originally, it wasn't in the Player's Handbook, it was in Player's Handbook 2. Oh, when it finally did come out, it didn't really fit what I wanted with Ichi. I don't know if I ever felt happy with the conversion for him.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it would have been in the second Player's Handbook because that's when they added more nature primal. It was primal stuff. So
yeah, because that's the thing. Barbarians in a lot of editions of D&D, they tend to be really nature oriented,
right, or
totem oriented, which is that's fine.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think of barbarians and things like that.
Yeah,
but at least in when it came to their abilities and everything like that, it was more just seemed like a more attack oriented martial class.
Yeah,
wasn't anything too. I don't know. The newer ones always seem like they have a little bit extra nature vibe to them. They're kind of just like a druidic warrior or something like that.
Right.
Not that that's bad, but
yeah. So if I had to remake Ichi in 4th edition, I might make him a fighter. Maybe. Because he was all about taking hits.
Sure.
Which barbarians, they can do in 4th edition, but they don't have an aggro mechanic like fighters do.
Right.
And that's just a matter of just thinking of the class a different way. There might even be a time where, let's say you had a fighter and maybe you found out that in 5th edition, let's say he was a very learned fighter. Maybe he would be better off being a rogue or being a bard or something because they have more skills.
Sure.
Now, maybe that sounds weird, but you can recontextualize his spell casting if you make him a bard. You don't necessarily have to say that his spells are magic. Could be that his spells are just pep talks or I don't know, some kind of just combat training or some sort of tactics related thing that mechanically is the same thing. It still has verbal components, shouting out orders, still has somatic components, pointing to who to go where.
Right. Yeah.
But then, so mechanically it still stays the same, but context-wise, flavor-wise, you can describe it as being something other than magic. There's always a way to make something feel different if you're willing to just think of it a little different way.
Right. And yeah, And that's basically it. Is changing editions. It takes a lot of work, but it's very doable.
Yes,
like it's
definitely.
It's not impossible. You just have to make sure everyone's on board, and it's worth putting the effort into changing things up.
Yeah.
As far as like the adventures and campaigns and stuff, shouldn't be too crazy. You might need to like look into some newer monsters to put into the adventure, like because like a monster in one edition might be a completely different challenge rating in another.
That's true. I had that issue a lot when we did our 4th edition Shackled City campaign last year. Because I wanted to use the iconic monsters that are in that adventure. But then it would be like you guys were like level 2 or something, which in 3rd edition, which the campaign was written for, you might fight an ogre at 2nd level. It'll be a tough encounter, but you can fight an ogre. Then you look at ogres in the 4th edition monster manual, and they're like an 8th level encounter or something.
Jeez.
And like, I can't really throw an 8th level enemy at a group of level 2s. So what I would end up having to do is I would have to think, okay, well, what purpose is this enemy meant to serve? They're just meant to be, a big tough enemy that's just guarding a door or whatever. So then I would find other enemies of the appropriate level that have mechanics that are similar. And then I would just throw, an ochre jelly at them or something, but I would describe it as being an ogre.
Right.
So changing encounters for like if you're running like a pre-written adventure or something, changing encounters is a bit of work when you switch to a different edition, but it's totally doable. You can throw anything at the players and just call it something else, and that's the majority of the experience right there.
Yeah, you just got to be creative with it.
Right. Now you could, let's say you switched campaigns, you switched from 3rd edition to 4th edition, and a little ways in, everybody realizes, I really don't like this. This is not what I'm looking for in D&D. I just want to say 4th edition I think is a great edition, but it's not what most people are looking for when they want to play D&D. So let's say you switch over and you realize you don't like it. You could just switch back. I mean, depending on how much time has passed since you switched in the first place, it would probably be about as much work as it was to switch to the new edition. You could spend that same amount of time switching back. Heck, just don't throw away your character sheets.
Right, and just
update your character sheet. If you're a couple levels higher than you were when you went to Switch Editions, just give that character a couple extra levels.
Yeah, just add the experience and kind of update it up.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. This reminds me of Order of the Stick, which is a very good webcomic, D&D based webcomic. Yeah. One of their first pages of it is the adventuring party. They're fighting a bunch of goblins, and a goblin goes to charge the dwarf, and then suddenly the goblin bounces off, and the dwarf is like, that's strange. And the Elan, the bard, he's standing there, suddenly he's wearing a chain shirt.
Oh, right,
because bards could use light armor. And then the wizard is like, I think I know what's happening. I think we're being updated to the 3.5 edition.
Right.
And then they're all like, oh man, more skill points. Belcar, the halfling ranger, he's like, oh man, I'm getting skill points. And then he looks at his weapon in his hand and it shrinks down. Dang it!
Sure.
Because of how 3.5 dealt with
weapon sizes.
Different weapon sizes, yeah.
Sure.
So that's just a funny little way of poking fun at the different editions.
Yeah, it's because I feel like when like a new edition comes out, and usually it's going to be the DM who DMs are usually the ones most into the game and like are going to be the ones with the books and stuff. And so when you get a new edition, when you get a new book, you really want to use it. You're like, this thing's so cool. I just read through it and I want to use it so bad. So it's like, it sucks when you're like in the middle of a campaign when that happens, because you just really want to play the new edition.
Yeah.
So there is a way to switch editions, but it's tricky. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does take a lot of work. And if everybody's willing to try it out, you might even want to just have one session where everybody comes over, spends that session remaking their characters, and then maybe like you run an encounter or two with them just to see how they like it.
Yeah, a little test run or something.
Yeah.
So
now here's a question. For me, I'll even tell you before I even ask the question. My answer for this would be no. Would you ever want for there to be an in-universe explanation for why the editions have changed? Like when 4th edition came around in Faerun, because of how they were changing how a lot of stuff worked in 4th edition.
Sure.
They tried to explain it by saying that there was this spell plague that swept through the Forgotten Realms and like destroyed countries and killed gods and so on and so on.
My.
And it was all meant to explain why the edition was different.
Huh.
I personally, like, I think the story and the mechanics never have to be connected. Like, you could have, in theory, you could have a wizard who is actually mechanically a fighter if you want to. You know, that'll take some explaining, but there's always a way to do it. You never have to have the mechanics be tied to the story. So I think it's a little goofy that they would do that.
Yeah. For something like as big as, and like, yeah, it's for something as big and well known as Faerun. It does seem silly that they did that. Like, I never realized that they did that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then if I'm not mistaken, when 5th edition came around, they basically had kind of like a reverse spell plague come through and like undo, or they had like a lot of time pass in the Forgotten Realms universe in order to explain why things are not what they were back in 4th edition.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they just really couldn't figure out a way to. I don't know. That's just. I don't know. That seems a bit odd that something like Faerun would do that.
I mean, if you want there to be like a story thing tied to the mechanics, that's fine. Go for it. But like, never feel like there has to be.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's just what they wanted to do. You know, that's just like it seemed like fun at the time when they were writing it.
Maybe some new writer came in and he already had in his own personal headcanon or whatever, he was like, no, in Faerun, this country doesn't exist and this god is dead and so on and so on. And he got put in charge and he was like, okay, all right, guys, here's what's going to happen. Cause like, you know, the Super Mario Brothers movie, I swear this is in some way connected. The Super Mario Brothers movie, you've seen it, right?
No, I don't think
Seriously?
I have. I know of what you're talking about.
It's so awful.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it has nothing to do with Super Mario Brothers whatsoever.
Right. It's very.
It is really Super Mario Brothers in name only. It's about Mario and his adopted son Luigi go to this alternate universe where dinosaurs evolved into people instead of mammals evolving into people.
Sure, like you do.
Which the universe was created when the meteor hit Earth and killed the dinosaurs and it split into two, whatever.
Oh, it's
so stupid. It takes place in this like grungy, dark Dino Hatton instead of Manhattan. Because Dino,
I get
whatever.
it. Oh.
And anyway, the story behind it though is basically that the people that were in charge of making the movie basically already had a story written that they wanted to make a movie out of. And when they got put in charge of the Mario Brothers movie, they were like, okay, let's just scribble out the title and put Super Mario Brothers on it. Hey, look at that. Instead of going into the Mushroom Kingdom, now they're going to Dino Hatton.
Right.
Where everything is like all the cars are bumper cars and like there's fungus everywhere and Goombas are actually dinosaurs.
Right. But it's
so bad. Oh, my goodness.
But why? I don't know. Why not?
But the point I'm trying to make is that in that movie, like I said, unless I am mistaken on my details, they already had a story written and then they just kind of snuck it into the Mario Brothers movie.
Sneak it in there.
Well, I guess.
Took a crowbar, forced it in. Like that's so like if you want to use the story that you wrote and it has to be Mario Brothers, like why make it so vastly different from Mario Brothers? How did it even? I don't know. I don't know. There's
so much of this movie is so awful. So I guess this is actually a really big tangent because I was using that to explain something, more or less a joke I was making about how 4th edition Forgotten Realms came to be. Anyway, I think we're done for this question.
Okay, we'll go on to the next one. All right. This next one from Zeus and his Beard on Reddit. You've mentioned playing in groups where the DMs and players switch off. How did you make that work with the in-game adventure party, and how did you manage the story for when the character's player suddenly became a DM? Any tips for doing that, for doing a campaign like this?
So this is a good question. When you do a campaign like this, and I very much recommend doing a campaign like this for reasons we'll get to in a little bit. When you do a campaign like this, the DM has a character, but their character is never present in the adventure when they're DMing. Mm-hmm. So kind of like what he asks, when someone takes over DMing, their character is off doing something else. It's up to the DM to decide what they're doing, but for whatever reason, they are not, you never deal with a DMPC in this scenario.
Right.
So yeah, like if I'm DMing, my character's off doing something else. When Chris takes over DMing, my character shows up, his character has some reason to go do something else.
Right.
And I actually kind of like that because I like the idea. I mentioned before, like, you know, how I think it's goofy when the characters will never split up for any reason whatsoever, even when they're just like going to the store. I think it really lends credibility to the world and to the characters when it's like, oh, my character, he has some other stuff he's going to do because he's a person.
Right.
He doesn't have to be with the party for everything that happens. He's off doing this. And heck, you could even tie it into the hook for your adventure.
Sure.
Gabe's character is missing. We go to, you know, what happened? Where is he?
We got to figure that out. We got to go rescue him.
Maybe they have to rescue him, which, you know, I think that'd be an interesting way for a DM to specifically put his character in peril. But it could be that they're rescuing him. It could be that while they're trying to find him, they find something else.
Sure.
And then, oh no, he was just, he got drunk and fell asleep behind the bar or something. I don't know. So yeah, everybody has a character and then their character just isn't present when the adventure is going on. And I'll even say that when we would do this, the DM, their character gets experience just like everybody else. Like let's say you're giving out, I don't know, 5,000 experience. You divide it up among 5 players. Everybody gets 1,000 experience. And then the DM, his character also gets 1,000 experience, even though his character wasn't there.
Sure.
You still give him the same amount of experience you give to everybody else so that you don't get penalized for being the DM.
Yeah. So everybody's still at the same level and everything like that.
Yeah. So I've been in several campaigns like this. When I first started playing as Ichi, that campaign was like this. So I started playing this group, and then in that group, I was playing with Chris, who we've talked about many times. His girlfriend at the time, Melissa, was one of the players and one of the DMs, and then one of the other players and DMs was named John. So it was the 4 of us. When we first started, I wasn't DMing in that campaign. Then after a few adventures, I DM'd like one short adventure here, another short adventure there later on. And so that was how I was able to get a lot of the learning that I did being a player and a DM.
Yeah, because this is definitely a good way to like learn how to be a DM.
Yes,
you don't have to commit to a whole campaign. You can you do an adventure every once in a while.
Definitely. And like when I first started running games with this group, I really didn't know what I was doing because I was a really bad DM before this. And so when I would be running an adventure, and one of the players, who again are all DMs, when one of the players does something that I wasn't expecting and I don't know how to deal with it, I can just say, hey guys, I don't know how to deal with this. What would you guys do?
Right.
And I mean, maybe that breaks a little bit of the illusion or whatever, but I mean, hey, it's a learning experience.
Right. You're all there to have fun. So.
Exactly. There was one time I was running an adventure. It was a published Wizards of the Coast 3rd edition adventure called Lord of the Iron Fortress. I was running this adventure. It involves the players going to another plane, the plane of Acheron or Acheron, however you pronounce that. It's a plane. It's this giant void where there's all these giant metal cubes floating around and banging into each other.
Okay.
So the players go to this giant metal cube and there's this big iron fortress that they go and they beat this bad guy, blah, 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 whatever. But there was a point early on in that where there was a side quest the players could go on where they get to this giant cube and there's a blue dragon lair that they can find. And one of the players, so the idea is you go in, you fight the blue dragons, you get some treasure, and then you go and you fight the big bad guy over in his fortress. Well, one of the players, John, he's the guy that Ichi failed a will save and started a war. It's because John was the DM at the time. John was a very, very clever player and a very clever DM. He had the idea, why don't we just find a way to trick the dragons into thinking that the guy from the Iron Fortress over there is stealing their stuff. And they had a great way to do that. They had found some belonging of the guy with like his name on it. And so they went and they teleported in or something. They managed to steal a bunch of treasure and then they left that guy's coat or whatever behind. And some of the dragons find all their stuff is gone and then, somebody left this coat. Oh, it's that guy. And so then the dragons then attacked his tower. And when I did this, I was like, I was going to have the dragons attack the tower, but I was like, guys, I don't know what this means for the adventure. And so they were like, okay, we took a little break. They like looked over a little bit of the adventure. You know, they're willing to separate their in character knowledge and out of character knowledge. Mm-hmm. So they looked over the beginning part and they as a collective, they were like, okay, well, this would probably happen. This would probably happen. And this would probably happen. And so I had that happen. And then the players went through a completely different type of dungeon than they would have. Cause now instead of this impenetrable fortress, now it's a fortress that like the door was ripped off of because all these dragons attacked.
Right.
And so I think it really allowed the players to feel like their actions had meaning. Right. Because, they did something that I as a DM didn't even know how to adjudicate. Mm-hmm. And so then they were able to help me make a solution for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great way to learn the game because you've always got somebody there that can help out if you need to.
Yeah.
Now there are some concerns though, some tips for running a campaign like this. Communication is key when you're running a campaign like this. Communication between the different DMs. Now I don't necessarily mean that you should be telling the other DMs what adventures you're going to be running.
Sure.
But I mean that couldn't hurt.
Right. At least maybe like some clues or hints.
So I mentioned Melissa was one of the players and DMs in the Ichi campaign. And then there was another campaign that we ran after that one, after John moved away, where it was myself, Chris, Melissa, and then our friend Jay. Mm-hmm. And then my friend Nick would pop in from time to time. But he and Jay never ran anything. The DMs were myself, Chris, and Melissa. And Melissa was a bit of a killer DM in the good sense and in the bad sense. Sure. She ran some really good adventures. She ran them really, really well. But she also tended to be very, very deadly. Mm-hmm. She would either run really deadly adventures or just her style would end up being really, really difficult.
Right.
There's one adventure that she ran that you may remember, Jeff, called The Black Egg.
Oh, jeez.
So that adventure begins with the player characters are coming back from like a difficult adventure. They're on their way back to town. They got all this loot they want to sell. They want to rest. They want to recuperate. They're on their way to town, some town that they're, I don't know, well familiar with. And as they're riding up to the town, what's that up in the sky? It looks like a shooting and then bam, the city gets destroyed by a meteor. A meteor crashes into the city and completely destroys it.
Yeah, and everybody has to immediately make like reflex saves or take a ton of damage.
And there's even rules in the adventure for like if you're at like ground zero,
right,
you have to make a ridiculously high reflex save. If you fail it, you are disintegrated instantly. Mm-hmm. No fortitude save, just a reflex save. If you manage to make this ridiculously hard reflex save, you still take enough damage that will probably still take like, I don't know, 20d6 damage, which will probably kill you instantly anyway. Right. So yeah, so she ran this adventure. During that adventure, all three of our characters, myself, Jay, and Chris, all three of us died at least once. Mm-hmm. At least once in this adventure. So she was known for running really, really deadly adventures.
Sure.
Not just deadly to characters, though. There was a time she was running an adventure. And keep in mind, I was the DM that was going to take over after her.
Right.
So she starts running an adventure. We're in this town. There was this town that our characters had invested in a lot, both character-wise, money-wise, and out of game. Like, us, the players, we had put a lot of time into designing this town.
Sure. Our
characters all had stake in this town. My character had like a mansion that his father had left behind and like a butler. Jay's character inherited a junky old house that apparently had like a secret basement that belonged to an old wizard a long time ago or something. Huh. He had like this secret compartment in his basement that like it would like blast you with magic energy if you opened the door the wrong way. And so I had a house, Jay had a house. Chris had a bar that his character bought during the course of the campaign, and then he had spent in-character money to make the bar bigger and more popular. And like the bar became a meeting place for our characters.
Sure.
It became like, that's how we got a lot of our hooks for adventures. We would meet up at the bar. We would hear some rumors. Just a lot of the role playing and stuff happened at Chris's bar.
Right.
And so this town was called Duval. We all lived there. We all cared about this town a lot. So Melissa starts running an adventure where we're just hanging out in Duval, chilling, maxing, relaxing, shooting some b-ball outside school, whatever. And suddenly it starts raining black rain,
which
is not a good sign. Long story short, within a few hours of game time, our town had been enslaved by demons.
Jeez.
A ton of demons showed up, and they were all demons. They were like demons that could fly and were incorporeal, so like we couldn't even hit them half the time. And they were led by this like 70-foot tall, 12-armed snake dude.
Oh.
And so much crap happened immediately. Mm-hmm. And like, I was the cleric. My spells didn't work half the time. So like, even when we did get attacked by demons or whatever, I couldn't do anything to stop them.
Oh, geez.
I could do a little bit, but all of us were having trouble doing anything. We had several encounters that I'm pretty sure we had to flee from.
Mm-hmm.
And so our town is getting destroyed. Literally, people in the streets are getting rounded up by demons and carried off in demon handcuffs or whatever. And we didn't know what to do.
Right.
There was no obvious solution to us. In the end, we turned tail and fled.
Mm-hmm.
We managed to sneak away into Jay's secret basement where demons seemingly couldn't get to us. And then I just started casting teleport spells until one of them worked. And we managed to teleport out of town and leave it behind. And spoiler alert, we never went back. Shortly after that, like the way that Melissa ended the adventure, however that works, is we fled to a pocket demiplane and we hid there. And periodically some giant eye would show up in the sky looking for us, and we would hide from it then too.
Oh gosh.
And this was especially troubling for me because, again, I was the next DM.
Right.
She ended the adventure having destroyed our town, destroyed all of the place for our plot hooks, and then made our characters go into hiding on some other plane. What am I supposed to do? Whatever adventure I was going to run, I can't run it anymore, or at least now I have to come up with a completely different way to get the characters into it. And like, just what a dick move. Like, again, we as players had invested so much into this town, and then this DM just goes and screws it up. Now, if you're the only DM, I guess that's fine. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But again, other DMs here, I'm another DM. I was planning on doing stuff with that town. Now I can't.
Right. I mean, so yeah, in this case, it's definitely like, probably should have brought this up with you so you can either be like, maybe let's not do that, or maybe we could find some way to make it, workable. And
I'm not saying that like you can't ever do something that's big and world changing, but like you said, just mention something to the other DMs. Hey, I'm thinking about doing something that's going to have really big repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay if I do that? And if they say, well, what are the repercussions? Then, maybe go into a little bit of detail. If you absolutely have to, tell them exactly what you're going to do. It's a courtesy.
Sure.
Because they're putting in just as much work as you are. So don't screw them over.
Yeah. Miscommunications can definitely be an issue.
Definitely.
But yeah, because it seems silly that like, she'd end it there.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it really does feel like maybe she was just getting sick of the town. Maybe she just didn't like the town.
It's possible. I don't know. Now, if I was going to be doing something like this in a campaign where there were multiple DMs, I sure as heck would not end my adventure. Well, town's destroyed. Everybody's enslaved by demons. Live with it.
Right.
I don't know what maybe we fled when we should have stayed, but like there was no incentive for us to stay. Every attempt we tried to fight something was met with utter failure.
Right. Yeah. The way you describe it does sound like a big shoehorn being like, all right, we're done with this place. Let's clean this slate, So.
Oh man, that was, I'm still, if you couldn't tell, I'm still bitter about this even today. And so and this had huge repercussions because like Jay was playing I think a neutral good, like person who fights for the people.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Who was all about like saving the weak and, defending the weak and everything. And like after we finished with that session and we fled and hid on another plane, Jay was like, I really can't rationalize my character running away. I'm going to retcon it so that my character stayed and probably died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jay left the campaign at that point. I think he might have been meaning to leave because of like, out of game reasons, but like his character didn't go on with us.
Sure.
His character just couldn't rationalize his character leaving while still being true to that character.
Right.
And, that really sucks. Now, of course, if he was really committed to the campaign, I'm sure there's some way he could have rationalized it, but the fact that he was forced to do so was really kind of a dick move from the DM. It's just so frustrating. And shortly after this, Melissa did something not quite as bad. Not on the same scale at all, but we were playing in a Mutants and Masterminds campaign. We've talked about Mutants and Masterminds on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's a D20 system, but it's superheroes.
Yeah.
And again, Melissa was up and then I was up after her. She ran an adventure that was almost identical to the adventure I was going to be running right afterwards. And that's not a huge deal. I can't really blame her, but I had to come up with a new adventure or at least some way to make it feel different enough.
In that case, that just comes down to coincidence sometimes. So
right.
You might have read the same book or something
maybe
or something like that.
Oh, sorry. One thing that I forgot to mention when she ran this adventure that destroyed our town in the D&D campaign, that was our last session with those characters. Like after that point, none of us felt like continuing that campaign. We didn't have a home anymore.
Didn't know what to do.
We were hiding on some pocket demiplane and like, well, if there's going to be a time for us to end this campaign and start a new one, I guess this is it. Thanks a lot, Melissa.
Sure.
Like you were saying, maybe that's kind of what she wanted. Maybe she wanted to shake things up and that was the result. Maybe she didn't want to play with those characters anymore.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go out on a high note. I don't know. But it was very frustrating for me as another DM in the group.
Sure.
So, I've talked about the good things about running a campaign like this. You get a huge variety because you get to see each different person's play styles. Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, it's easy because you don't have to plan out an entire campaign.
Right. Yeah. You don't have to commit to a whole thing. You could just, if you find an adventure you like, you just run that one.
Exactly. It does lend itself more to episodic campaigns, but that there's no reason it has to. Mm-hmm. Like whenever Chris would run an adventure in our games, he would have his adventures be like kind of linked. Right. Sometimes they would be directly linked. Sometimes they would just be like similar in concept.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really easy to play in a campaign like this. It's really easy to DM in a campaign like this. There's a lot of really neat opportunities that you don't really get in a normal campaign.
Sure.
For example, there was another D&D campaign where I was going to be the first DM. We were starting a new campaign. I was going to run the first adventure, and then like Chris was going to take over after that. And so I used the first adventure as a way to introduce my character.
Sure, that's cool.
I very much stole it from the Chronicles of Narnia, but I ran an adventure where the players were teleported to another plane, basically. Mm-hmm. While they were there, they essentially met my character, and then my character joined up with them and ran away and escaped with them.
Gotcha.
And so my character was not originally from that plane. He was from this other plane. And so it was just a really neat opportunity to introduce my character where if I wasn't the DM, I never would have been able to do that.
Right.
It would be a little weird if the DM was like, okay, you have to sit out for this session while the players go and meet your character.
Sure.
It's a little weird. But yeah, it was a really, really neat opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool.
The only problem, well, not the only problem, because I've talked about some of the other problems with this. One problem with running a campaign like this is you have to have several people who are willing to DM.
Yeah.
And, from the sound of it, a lot of groups, that's their biggest obstacle is nobody wants to DM. I can understand it. At the same time, I think that DMing really has has benefits that you really can't get anywhere else. So sometimes I love to DM. Sometimes I'd love to be a player.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you do have to have players that are willing, but I think it'd be much more willing. It would be much easier to find someone who is willing to run one adventure here, one adventure there.
Right.
Rather than being like, okay, I'll be the DM for the whole campaign.
Sure.
So yeah, I love campaigns like this. I think they're really cool. Sometimes maybe you're in the mood for one, straight story all run by the same person. But if you're going to do this, just make absolutely sure that you communicate with the other DMs.
Sure.
Just don't be a dick, guys. Come on, seriously. Just don't.
All right. Next question comes from Laughing Jackal.
Jackal?
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 It's Jackal.
Is it Jackal? It's Jackal.
It's Jackal. This was on Reddit. As a new DM, he's having issues knowing when and how to give players magical items in-game. Asking, should he just say, you have a magic broom, write it in your inventory, or should he make flashcards with the info on them?
So the first part of this, how and when to give players magic items, I say give players magic items whenever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love magic items. They are very much my favorite part of D&D.
Yeah, they're very fun.
They're great. Now, as long as you're not giving out magic items that have static bonuses, like a +1 to hit or like plus whatever to strength or whatever, I think that it's harder than you think to give your characters too many magic items.
Right.
There's a lot of limiting factors. Number one, slots.
Sure.
Certain magic items can only be worn on certain, you can only have 2 rings and like 1 cloak and 1 suit of armor, 1 pair of gloves, whatever. So if they have an extra one, they're not going to be able to use it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to use both of them together.
Right.
So like there's that. That's a limiting factor. Also, you can only be attuned in 5th edition. You can only be attuned to a certain number of items at a time.
Right.
So if you give your player characters items that require attunement, they can only have a certain number of those at a time. Mm-hmm. There's also action economy.
Right.
If the item you give them doesn't just give a flat bonus, if it's something that they have to actively use, they can only use, if it takes an action, you can only use 1 per round, and then that's in place of their attack.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, there are inherent limiting factors to the majority of magic items. And so I would say just give your characters magic items whenever you feel it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. If it starts to become a problem, you'll probably know well in advance.
Sure.
And there are ways to reduce the amount of items that your characters have, and we'll get into some of those. I would say, first thing, one way to get rid of a magic item that a player has without just doing the stupid, okay, somebody stole it.
Right.
That's stupid. First thing, I would say that whenever you give someone a new item or you make it so they can buy a new item, make it so that they have to trade an item they already have.
Sure.
Now, again, in the adventure zone, whenever the players they have like a little fantasy Costco thing they go to between adventures where the players are given 1 free magic item at the end of every story arc. Mm-hmm. Just one kind of like randomized. The DM has like a list of items for that character and he like rolls randomly for one of them.
Okay.
So they get 1 free magic item every arc. And then whatever money they've gotten, they go to this magic shop basically where he has a list of items they can buy. They can buy them using the money they've gotten. They can also trade in items they already have for money towards an item that they want.
Sure.
So, if they have an item that they haven't really used, they can trade that in towards something that they will use. Mm-hmm. And so you can do something similar in your games. You can make it so that, the player has this one item, but he wants that other item. Maybe the guy just says, hey, I'll trade you this item for the one you already have.
Yeah.
And so you can do it that way. You could also, rather than just making it so that somebody steals their item, we talked about in the Age of Worms campaign, we talked about how there was a point in the campaign where the players have a piece of an artifact,
right?
And they become targets because of it. The artifact becomes a liability,
right? Yeah,
because it's a powerful item. People start attacking. They don't just outright steal it, no rolls involved, but they do get attacked because of it,
right?
So the players might say, "Well, we've gotten attacked twice because I have this really powerful sword. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some way that we can trade this to somebody for we can give this to somebody for safekeeping, and then when they give it to the Archmage or whatever, like in Age of Worms, then they give it to them. Then the Archmage gives them a less powerful magic, like gives each of them a less powerful magic item in place of it.
Right. And so something more, more for that character specifically, but a little bit more balanced, so it's not
right. So if you do see that there's one item that is really overpowered, if you can rationalize thieves showing up in the middle of the night to steal it, then you can also rationalize thieves attacking the party to steal it. And that is much more fair because then the players actually have a chance to fight them off.
Right. And they might succeed the first time and the second time. And
exactly.
But the third time they're like, okay, this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, especially, in 3rd edition, I think this led to its own problem where in order to challenge the party, the attackers had to have magic items of their own. Sure. And every time the players fought off the attackers, they would get those magic items too.
More magical items.
That's not really the case anymore because magic items aren't quite as crucial.
Sure.
But so.
But like we said, like you can't really have too many magical items.
Especially if they're not flat bonuses. That's where a lot of people run into problems. It's like, oh, another Helm of Intelligence +6. Oh gosh, yawn. Let me toss it on the pile so we can sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're not giving out flat bonuses, like we said, if it's something that is slotted, something that requires attunement, or something that requires an action, or all three, that's a severely limited magic item. You're not going to be able to use too many of those.
Right, yeah.
So just give out magic items whenever you think it's appropriate. You'll get better as time goes on, but like you'll probably be able to tell when it's starting to become a problem. And when it does, you can fix that. I remember one more thing about like making something cost a magic item. In the Tomb of Horrors, there is a door that can only be bypassed by when you get to this door and there's like a slot, and then above it, it looks like the letter O is carved into the stone, but it's not the letter O. It's depicting a ring. In order to get through this door, you have to put a magic ring of any kind of magic ring into the slot, at which point the magic ring is destroyed and the door opens. So you can use that as an example of a way that you can make giving up a magic item into part of the adventure.
Right.
That is the cost in order to proceed. So you can definitely find ways to involve that in the story and make it really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, give out magic items whenever you want. Go hog wild. I love magic items. If you have to, if it absolutely comes to it, just talk to the players and say, okay, guys, we need to get rid of some of these magic items because it's getting crazy. But I think it would take a long time before you got to that point.
Like a magic item yard sale or something.
Exactly. So then the other part of this question, should you just say you have a flying broom, write that in your inventory? You can. Yeah. I would say that's probably the way most people do it. Again, another Adventure Zone reference. There was an item that one of the characters bought at Fantasy Costco. It was like this little mechanical spider that he could like put in a room. It would hide and it would listen, and it would, whatever information it gained, it would like communicate that back to the owner. And so the players were on this train where a murder had taken place. It was a really, really cool adventure. And so they were on this train. He left the little mechanical spider in a room in order to spy on some of the other NPCs in the hopes of finding out who the murderer was. And then when the train inevitably crashed at the end of the adventure, spoiler for like the 5th episode or something, when the train eventually crashed, afterwards the player realized, crap, I forgot my spider on the train, and now it's gone. So it is up to the player to remember that they have an item.
Right.
And to keep track of it. And if they forget they had it, well, I guess you didn't have it. If it's something like they just forgot to use it, well, you just forgot to use it. If it's something they just forgot at home, well, you just forgot it at home. And then in the case of the train, it's gone forever. Right. But yeah, it is up to the player to remember that they have it.
Yeah, they might just have it. It's just sitting in the bottom of their bag of holding.
Exactly.
And they just don't remember it's there until the last adventure.
However, if you did want to make flashcards with the magic items on it, I'm sure your players would appreciate it. I think that's a really, really cool idea.
Oh yeah, stuff like that's awesome.
If you want to put the time into just making them yourself, you can. I'm pretty sure you can even buy like a set of cards, like pre-made cards that have all of the magic items from the Dungeon Master's Guide on it. I'm sure that exists.
Cool.
So you could buy that, and then it is really nice to have a physical representation of your item in front of you.
Yeah.
And I really liked in 4th edition, I would do that with my powers. When all of the powers my character had, I would make little cards for each of those. And then once I used like a daily power, I'd flip it over, and that way I could know at a glance that I don't have that available to use. Similar with magic items, if it has like a once per day use, flip over the card, and now you know you're not going to accidentally use it again because you know that it's not usable.
Yeah, I like that about the 4th edition like character sheets where like they had like the little like panels for the abilities, so you can the little check boxes too every time you used it.
And the 4th edition had the official character builder, which was a really, really great program. Such a shame that it doesn't exist in 5th edition.
Sure.
But if you made a character through that and then just hit print on your character sheet, it would print out cards that you could just cut out and use exactly as they were. I always liked to make them myself, and then I would fake laminate them by getting just packing tape and just slapping a piece of packing tape on it.
Sure.
And then I would have under the tape, I would have all of the permanent text, like it does 1d8 plus I would have that written out in pen, and then I would cover it with tape, and then I would get a dry erase marker or a wet erase marker, and I would write in the modifier.
Sure.
Because the modifier is going to change. The base damage wouldn't change, but the modifier would.
Mm-hmm.
And then every time they leveled up and the modifier changed, I could erase it and write in a new number for the modifier.
Very cool.
Yeah, I really like making like handouts for my players, or when I'm a player, I like doing it for my character. If you did it for your players, I'm sure they would appreciate it.
Yeah,
that's a really cool idea. Mm-hmm. So yeah, give out magic items whenever you want because they're awesome and they're a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll probably know when they're starting to become a problem so that you can dial it back a bit.
Right.
And then, yeah, just tell them you have a flying broom. They'll put it in their inventory. If you want to make a magic item card, you can.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, that'll do it for today. If anybody wants to submit items and questions, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, a running list of questions asked, and important links, or to download the episode, go to interpartyconflict.blogspot.com, where there's a link to our SoundCloud page. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/interpartyconflict, or our subreddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict for weekly discussion questions from me. We're also on Twitter at InPartyConflict, and we're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and YouTube. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We love when people subscribe, when people rate us, when people review us.
Yes.
The reviews we've gotten have been very great and so awesome. We
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hackers RPG. And so, Jeff, till next time, when in doubt,
Jump on the wheel.
there you go.